Okay.
Okay. So, what led you to become a Christian missionary in Africa?
I would say that what led me becoming a Christian missionary in Africa would be growing up around people in my community who were strong in their faith. And we were taught from a very young age at our school, at our church, that um, if you were a Christian, your job was to tell others about Christ. And I've always loved to do that. And I just always felt drawn to different cultures and different people groups, and I found them interesting. And I wanted to learn more and share the gospel while doing that.
Where exactly did you serve and how long were you there?
Overall, I've been to 12 different countries, but we're talking just about my missions in sub Saharan Africa. So that's any country below the Sahara Desert. Um, Sorry, wait, what was the question? Oh, okay.
When you were in Africa, where exactly did you serve and how long were you there?
Okay. While I was in Africa doing missions, I was what's called a sub Saharan African missionary through the International Missions Board through the Southern Baptist Convention. And I worked in countries that were below the Sahara Desert. So that's where sub Saharan missionary comes from. I primarily worked in 3 different countries. My home was based in Zimbabwe, but I worked in Botswana and South Africa as well. And I was there in 2012 for right at 6 months.
What was your mission's primary focus? Like, was it education, healthcare, community development, or something else?
So while I was serving, I'll focus on Zimbabwe just because that's where my home was. While I was serving in Zimbabwe, my mission there, my actual job title there, was to partner uh, in local schools in the area, which are all private schools because they don't have public education. So we would go into private schools and we would teach them about respecting their bodies and what it means to have a godly relationship. In the area that I was in, there's a lot of teenage brides, there's a lot of abuse, and our job was to partner with missionaries who were already there, but we, being the young college age kids, got to go into school and teach them what Christ had in mind for them for their futures and how to protect themselves and their spirit, and also of course witness to them too.
So, what was your daily life like as a missionary in Africa? What did you do day to day?
My daily life in Zimbabwe was, it's kind of hard to say because it wasn't always the same, but a lot of times it would be weekly visits to different schools around us. We would try to go, say, to the same school every Monday. Some days we would have to drive really far out into the stereotypical bush of Africa that you see on National Geographic. And we would have to stop our car because an elephant would be in front of us, or we would have a group of monkeys running in front of us. So we definitely did what I like to call the Africa you see on TV. We would go out there and visit schools. There was also a home that we started working in called the Sandra Jones Center, and it's a home for sexually abused girls and abandoned babies, and it's an HIV home. So these are children who were left in the street or abandoned by their families because they were believed to have been cursed and they had no one to take care of them. So we got involved with them, and I would stay with the girls sometimes, and we worked with those girls too, and we started having them go through our Bible study classes. But day to day, we would go to our schools or we would go out into the bush. We also began partnering with an eye doctor who lives in Georgia but comes to Zimbabwe and lives there 6 months out of the year, every year. And his family, and on days when we did not go out to schools, we would go partner with him and we would go even farther out. And one time we even drove so far out into the bush, we were in a village where they had never seen a white person before, and they ran beside our car yelling Coca-Cola because they knew we were from America and Coca-Cola is American. And that was really neat. We have been places where they had never seen a car before. We had been places where a band aid had never been presented to them. So my job title on my visa there was to work in schools and start the education program. But like I said, we were all over doing all kinds of different things.
So, what you mentioned, like being out in the bush and people never seen a car or white people. What were the biggest cultural adjustments that you had to make being there so long?
So at this point in 2012, when I was living there, I had been on several different trips, short term mission trips before this, Guatemala and Romania, and some things like that. So I had seen different parts of the world before, but I had never seen sub Saharan Africa, and I had never seen Zimbabwe and their culture, and their culture really is so different than those in Botswana and those in South Africa. And they all speak different languages, and I think it's a really big misinterpretation, I would say, that Africa is just one big place. And I thought that until I lived there. And Zimbabweans are so different than their Botswana neighbors or their South African neighbors below. So as far as day to day, something that I think I really loved was how everyone moves so slowly. So the countries we were in were settled by the English. So tea time is still observed 4 times a day. And no matter what you're doing, it doesn't matter if you're in the bush. You stop what you're doing and you sit down and you have tea. We would be out one time working in the fields. We were helping this family, and a little girl, probably 5 years old, walked from her house way far out to where we were carrying a little jug, and that was tea. And so we got to sit down and have that little break. So tea time was a really big adjustment for me, as well as just how slow it is. There's a funny saying that we picked up on. So if you say, I'm coming now, that means I'll be there in the next couple hours. If you say I'm coming now, that means I'm getting ready to leave my house and I'll be there soon. But if you say I'm coming right now, that means they were on their way right then. So we got a lot of, we would have, say, a supper in our house that we had prepared for our whoever. And we would say, oh, it's ready at 5 o'clock. Well, we very quickly learned food gets cold and nobody shows up till 6 or 6:30 because everyone's just, they're not ran by a clock or a phone. Of course, schools have set times and end times, but everyone runs at their own pace and it's very slow, and it's something that really is beautiful, and I wish I could have held on to that longer.
So there are a lot of positive things that happened, but what's something you remember as being either a challenge or maybe could have been maybe the worst part of your experience
Mm.
there? Maybe some of the things you've seen or people you encountered. What's something that stands out to you as being challenging about your time?
Something challenging, probably the most challenging thing that I have seen, at least working in Zimbabwe, was we had the opportunity to go into a hospital, and we got to go to the burn unit. And in Zimbabwe, I lived in one of the bigger cities called Bulawayo, and I loved it. And it was not the bush that you see on TV. You know, they were gas stations and grocery stores and concrete and wonderful, big, beautiful buildings. So this hospital was kind of on the outskirts. We got to go into this burn unit, and we saw the children in the burn unit. Medical care is still extremely minimal there, and there were babies burned for whatever reason, sometimes intentional. Um, were just laying in metal cribs, their bandages not changed for days. They were extremely skinny. They were infected, and we just got to go in there. And with our minimal first aid training, we were able to help clean and redress them with gauze and things that we brought. So that was probably the hardest thing I've ever seen.
So at that point in your life, you probably hadn't been around many children that age because you were in college
Mm-hmm.
that had been, I guess I'm trying to say that in that traumatic of an environment. So how did your faith guide you through that challenge or other challenges you encountered?
When I think back to that moment being in the burn unit with those children, I think of my faith is the only thing that I had in that moment that kept me going, if that makes sense. Of course, I questioned, why is this happening to all of these children, and what did this 4-month-old baby do to deserve this? Um, and I think the only thing that I could lean on in those moments is that life is not fair. God is just. It is my job. God has called me to be there in that moment, to come alongside and assist. And it's not my place to understand cruel and evil in this world, but it's my job to do what I can to make it better, to alleviate something for someone, even if it's just 2 minutes or cleaning a bandage. And so I guess I, I didn't understand why those things were happening. And my faith just told me, your job is to be a servant. And that's the only way I could mentally push through and not cry in the moment. Is this is bigger than me. It's not me feeling sorry for them. It's, I was called to come and serve, so I'm going to serve.
So now jumping, what, 13 years in the future as a preschool teacher, how do you come into your classroom? If you, in this answer, kind of explain your demographic of students,
Okay.
and I want you to just kind of connect how your experiences in Africa, maybe in the burn unit, in the women's and children's shelter you work in, and then in the school, just like how does that connect to what you deal with day to day?
Okay. So now let's skip forward. It's 2025, and I'm here in my hometown teaching in my dream job. For those of you who might be watching and you don't know what public preschool is in a public school that's not Head Start, Head Start has some similarities, but this is just my classroom. So I have an inclusive classroom, which means I have children with children who qualify to come to preschool based on income guidelines, or I have children who qualify to come to preschool based on a disability. So I have children here with in my classroom with limited mobility. I have children here who have disabilities and other medical complexities. I really have a wide range of students that I serve. Some of my students here use eye gaze technology to communicate with us. Some of our students have a touch AAC device. So whenever they touch it, think of an iPad. There's a program, and we can cater that to our classrooms and what they need whenever they touch that. They can tell us and communicate that way. We have picture schedules around the room. So that's just to paint kind of the comparison of that. So my classroom serves all kinds of students with disabilities, and our classroom is now where I'm called to serve. My classroom, I for lack of better words, I truly do believe we celebrate every kind of child, and we we bring them all together. Um, sorry, I don't remember the rest of the question.
Just I'm kind of going to add to it. What? How do you use what you learned and saw in
Gotcha.
Africa
Okay.
every day in your classroom?
Okay.
How does that affect your
Yes.
teaching and your
Okay.
interactions with your students?
So, what I learned when I was in Zimbabwe and Botswana and South Africa has really just shaped my view of children, but the world. It has made me much more sensitive and open and understanding to different cultures in our classroom. It has helped me become more selfless because while the children are in my classroom, I'm not just teaching them, I'm also teaching the child that has to go home that evening and come back to me the next day. I'm teaching the whole child. Um, and after having traveled, being in my classroom helps me support my students because I'm able to put myself in someone else's situation because I have before. I've seen it and I've lived it. So I think it makes me a more empathetic teacher.
Have you always wanted to be a teacher?
The answer, have I always wanted to be a teacher? The answer is no. When I was in school, I wasn't super into quote unquote classwork. And whenever, is that Poppy?
You're really good, by the way.
Oh my gosh, thanks. Okay. Oh, okay. Hey, Poppy, is it one or two? One? Okay. Just take your underwear off, baby. It's okay. It's okay. Okay. Are you still recording?
Yeah.
Okay. So, have I always wanted to be a teacher? The answer is no. I knew I wanted to work with children and families in some capacity, but I really did not think my calling was in the classroom until I went and I worked in classrooms in sub-Saharan Africa, and I enjoyed it, and I thought this is something where I can serve. This is a place where I can serve.
So you work in public school. Obviously, it's not a Christian school, but you are a Christian. You are a missionary, and you view the classroom.
Enrichment is now over. You may release your students. Thank you.
You view the classroom as your mission field. How do you balance being a Christian in a public school setting?
Oh, okay. How do I balance being a Christian in a public school setting? When I was in Africa, we were in private Christian schools, so I was openly sharing the Bible and the gospel and asking those students to turn in their Bibles to whatever passage we were reading. But public school, we don't do those things. How I serve Christ in my school is I take care of his children. I believe wholeheartedly in scripture when it tells us to be the hands and feet, that that's what we're doing. So even though I'm not singing Jesus songs to these kids and I'm not sharing Bible stories with them, whenever they come to me and they're crying, we bend down on their level and we listen to them. We provide them with solutions. We love them. Scripture tells us that we cannot share the gospel with someone without meeting their physical needs first. So someone who's hungry and needs clothing is not going to be as receptive to the gospel. So I'm doing the groundwork here. I'm where I'm doing the groundwork here. Sometimes we have to wash our kids' hair in our bathroom sink. Sometimes I bring my daughter's clothes from home and I send it home with other children. Here, I'm doing the groundwork. We're being the hands and feet, and we have to trust that God will take care of the rest. Hey, baby. You okay?
We're almost done.
You want mommy's phone, Poppy? Hey, why don't you stand? Don't sit down. Come over here and stand at mommy's desk and watch something on PBS Kids, okay?
All right, next question. I have 2 more questions. If you could take your preschool students to Africa for a week, to Zimbabwe or somewhere in Africa, what would you want them to see and experience?
If I could take my students to Zimbabwe for a week, I would absolutely love for them to experience whenever we did a homemade water slide. Whenever I lived in Zimbabwe, there was a horrible drought. Even Victoria Falls was dried up. It was nothing but rock. And we saved water for almost a week in random barrels. If it did sprinkle a little bit, or if we had water in our tank, we would save it. And we went back to the Sandra Jones Center, which is the home for sexually abused girls and abandoned babies. And we laid out trash bags that we had people mail us, and we would throw water on it that we had collected, and we let the children have a water slide. And it was wonderful. And I would love for my kids here to experience that.
What advice would you give to someone consider? I'm going to ask this in two parts. What advice would you give to someone considering missionary work?
If I could give advice to someone who's considering missionary work or just learning about other cultures in general, I would say that it's 2025. It's time to do it. America, we get so sucked into our bubble that we do not realize what's happening in other places of the world. That's something that I realized was how little I knew about the rest of the world because of our American bubble. So my advice would be to go out and travel and meet new people. You are here to serve others, whether you're a Christian or not. We are all on this planet together, and we are here to serve each other.
What advice would you give to someone considering a career in education, specifically early childhood education?
Okay. My advice for someone considering a career in early childhood education is patience, 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 and just making sure that you come into this as selfless as you can be, because you will be humbled daily. And early childhood, with the proper interventions and with properly trained staff, it really can change the world. Birth through age 5, the brain is developed by 95% by the time a child is 5 years old. So to say the emphasis on early childhood is important is understated. It's extremely important. We have a lot of fun. There's always paint and glitter everywhere, but children are learning, and we are wiring their brains to be leaders and educators and creators. And we need people in our field who love children and care about them and want them to succeed.
Do you have anything else you want to add or anything else that
I'm
popped in your
good.
head during? You did such a good job.
Did I feel like I talked way